Hey everybody, this is Taylor Hamlin, and this is History Forge. This is a third part of a video series on how to not actually, it's not how to build a lesson, it is me justifying how I build lessons. I might do a how-to later. But right now in this video, we're going to focus on formative assessments. So if you've been watching, the first two parts, we're talking about colonial religion, and we're going to be focusing on like how to actually create assessment measurements that would help students master a historical thinking skill. So that's gonna be this next part. Stay tuned. All right, so we're back on top now. We're looking at religion in colonial America. Same lesson plan. If you watch the first part of this video series, you notice that we did the standards. Then the second part, we did these compelling questions. And if you keep scrolling down, you'll see we did these compelling questions, this inquiry and stuff. And now we're here, formative performance tasks. And honestly, I think this is the hardest part. In fact, I made this video series just for this part, and this is why I chunked it up because I thought I was just going to talk about this, but I realized, like, oh, I need to talk about standards and compelling questions first before I jump in. So, looking at this formative performance task isolated, then now that you know about, why I picked my questions, why I picked my sources, all that. Now the question is like, okay, well, if we're in a classroom and we're like, all right, well, I want my kids to know about colonial religion and how to monitor and question it. How do we actually do that? Like, how do we measure it? Because in the past of teaching history, haha, um, we had like what was it? We had like these sheets of like just the facts, and we give them to the kids, and they have these PowerPoint slides or presentations or whatever. If you grew up in my age, like we had like little overheads, and the teacher just like told us a bunch of information, and that was it. And, like we were expected to like just listen to it, and then give it back during a test or something. And that kind of sucks, if I'm being honest. Like, it's not really a good way of learning history, first of all, because it's boring. It's also actually not a good way of understanding history. Like, that's not what history is. History is not just a bunch of facts coming from one place and one person. It's a lot more complicated than that. And we need to make sure we're measuring it that way. So these performance tasks are kind of doing that. They're not kind of doing it, they are. And they're based off monitoring and questioning. So if you watched the last video, you know I chose monitoring and questioning as our skill. If you want to know where to find that stuff, I got it here on History Forge. Again, all the links are on the bottom in this video description. And when I'm looking at creating formative assessments, I'm always asking myself, like, what skill am I taking and using to test these students? And that's a big question because if I scroll up, you'll see there's actually more than one big skill. Like we have sourcing and summarizing, we have corroboration, and there's more below this, but I'll stick with monitoring and questioning. And then we have like these 5 sub skills that you can kind of see me circling with my mouse. And beyond those 5 sub skills, we have even like questions and prompts that we could possibly use. And these are kind of just guides. These are not the actual questions I would use. I use them as prompts to kind of guide my decision. Not only that, not only do we have to choose like what kind of skill we're looking at, we also have to like think about like how do we actually stage thinking. I find Bloom's taxonomy is a great way of looking at it. So looking at kind of an example of Bloom's taxonomy, digital planning verbs. You have the left side, which is remembering. It's very basic level. Then we have creating. That's very advanced level. And we want our students to get to this advanced level. That's where we could say like they are mastering, the thinking that they're trying to do because they're actually originally creating something. So I use a combination of these things. I use Bloom's taxonomy, and I also use like these questions and prompts, and this is a guide to kind of help me figure out like, all right, what's a very basic thing that they could do to get started with this skill, and then how can they go forward? So actually looking at the lesson plan, let's look at this first one. It says formative performance task. Think about how John Winthrop and John Cotton's ideas might have affected their communities. As you examine the sources, create a list of questions. These questions should have a clear connection to religion and society. So they have to read the sources, and these are down here. It says John Winthrop, City Upon a Hill, and then divine right to occupy the land, John Cotton. And so, I mean, the questions, like, you do need to have a good understanding of the history. You as a teacher need to know the primary sources, like what they say, what they mean. And, like, this formative task is pretty basic. Like, all I'm asking students to do is read sources and develop questions. Now, even though it's a basic thing, you're going to have to model for those students. So say, for example, you gave students, like, I don't know, 15 minutes to read one of these sources, and you told the kids, like, hey, I want you guys, to watch me do this for 5 minutes. And then like you would do it. Like you would show the kids like, oh, I think this is interesting. Here's my question. And then the next 10 minutes, like, all right, your turn. You saw me do it. Now you do it. There's no wrong answers. Like just make questions, make a list. And then you would like, circulate around the room, you would watch them. And I would even say like, if you're grading this is very important. If you're grading this, all you should be doing like is like holding a roster with all their names on it and like checking off to see if they are listing questions. Like you can read over their shoulders a little bit and kind of like gauge like what kind of questions they're asking, but it shouldn't be a complicated assessment. This should not be something that like the kids turn in their list of questions and now you have to spend 2 hours reading every list and writing down. Like, no, don't do that. That's a waste of time. Just watch them do it. Like make sure they're actually doing it, and then like have some kind of review activity at the end where they can all participate, or they can like share out their information. But grading this should be simple. It should be check, they did it. Check, they did it. That's all. One final thing too, like you'll notice that like at the end I said like these questions have to have a clear connection to religion and society. Well, that connects to their compelling question. That connects to all these like activities up here. That connects to the actual thing we're talking about. Like we can't just have them randomly, going crazy. Like the prompt is to focus on religion. That's the theme of this content. So make sure that when you're writing questions like this, that you're actually, writing down questions that make sense, like they have a clear connection. So that's this first level, and like behind me, it's like right here in blue. Like we have a formative assessment. That's the first step. Now we need to go up to a second step. So right here it says write a paragraph over the following prompt. As you examine the sources, what were some common themes, ideas, and or beliefs that you want more information about? Why would this information be important? Maybe that question sounds familiar because if you read through these, you'll notice that it's literally almost word for word this one. And I'm just taking things like this. Even like the first one was this: create questions based on the analysis of a source. So I created these skills to kind of just help guide people. Like I don't think every skill needs to be used. I think you could even probably focus on one skill. But the point is we're just trying to get the kids to do things that look like monitoring and questioning. So going back, the kids have to create a paragraph, which is a little more complicated. They have to now write out a full paragraph. Instead of listing things, they actually have to, kind of develop what would be considered an argument, and that can be kind of tough. So doing that then, it might be a little harder to grade. Like you probably can't just like walk around and do it. So what I would say is, give kids like 15 minutes to do this in class. Say like, hey, you got 15 minutes, write these out. And then I would tell students, like give them to me when you're done, almost like exit tickets kind of thing. And I would grade these during the next time the class was going. And I would not spend a lot of time on each one. Like I might spend 30 seconds, 35, 40 seconds on each one, just looking for specific kind of monitoring and questioning kind of things. Like did they actually identify any big themes? You could circle those. You can use symbols like to save yourself time. Like I wouldn't write big notes out. I would just find a way to kind of create symbols. Like for example, if you have like a green highlighter and you highlight all the cool points in green, great. Now the kids know like what they did awesome, and then those can be passed out the very next day. And if you like only do 30 seconds per one, you have a class of 15 or 30. That's 15 minutes. You can get these done like this. This should not be something that you spend hours on because they're not going to take the feedback anyway and like change their lives. Like you should really have very focused feedback that doesn't take a lot of time for you to do. So this obviously, I would say this formative assessment is also kind of more mid-level. So if we go back to that Bloom's taxonomy, I would say like writing a paragraph and using the source the way they did would be more like applying and analyzing. So we're kind of getting more into this like middle area. So we're scaffolding up. That's the entire point. And so, at this point now, we have 2 grades in the book, or we should, and each, you guys figure out like what the grades look like. I use like points of 4, I think, so I would have counted this is 4 points, this is 4 points, and this is 4 points. You do whatever you want. And the kid, like, just be consistent with the kids and how you do it. And if you have questions about it or you're like curious, just email me your comments in the YouTube the video description, the comment section. That's what it's called. Comments in there, and I'll answer questions. Finally, formative performance task number 3, write an argument, describe how useful the sources are in deciding whether or not religion was important in the American colonies. I'm going to highlight this one even because I realize like that is going to become more complicated. All right, I'm back. Sorry, I forgot that if I use my keyboard, sometimes my intros and outros will go off. We're still recording though, so I think we're good. Um, I'm gonna write that in there just because, like, the formative performance task number 3, you need to like actually come up with a writing strategy for the students. Like writing an argument can be pretty complicated, and so I use the race strategy, and I made videos about it. So I'll make sure to put that in the video description. But it clearly like writing an argument and describing how useful the sources are, and deciding whether or not the religion was important in American colonies. That's a pretty high level thing. Like we're getting very much into like the like looking at Bloom's taxonomy, like we're evaluating sources, we're creating an arguments, like we're very much on this side now. So that would probably take a little longer to grade, just because like it's an argument. But I don't think it would take that much longer. Like I would say I would probably spend maybe a minute on each of those. It's only I would say an argument's a paragraph. That's all it needs to be. I don't even tell students like don't get complicated, guys. Like make a very structured, to the point paragraph that tells me exactly what you think. Some students might struggle with that, and it's like I know when I did this stuff, like I had a lot of times where students would write me like pages of stuff when a paragraph would suffice. And so I mean, be very clear with like what you want with students. If it's only the formative assessment, I think a paragraph is fine, honestly. And that's kind of a good way to kind of just pull them back a little bit, because the summative assessment is going to be more complicated, and that's where they can really like go all out if they want to. So that's the formative assessments. That's all I wanted to really talk about. And if I scroll down a little bit, you'll see why there needs to be a fourth part. I got summative performance tasks and taking informed action. So I'm going to go over those two things in the very fourth and final part of the video. Yeah. All right, so that is the conclusion to the third part. We'll talk about formative assessments, and next time I'm going to be talking about the actual summative assessments, and I'm going to be talking about like how you can take informed action, and all those things would just be one more kind of level or scaffold to show mastery over a skill. So see you next time.